Part 1, The Rusty Relic. The hangar was a graveyard of forgotten dreams, its massive doors half buried in the crimson sands of the desert planet Xerxes 9. Captain Yarrick stood at the entrance, his weathered leather jacket catching the faint glow of the twin suns setting on the horizon. His ship, the Starforge, loomed in the shadows, its hull scarred and rusted, bearing the marks of countless battles. To most, it was a relic of a bygone era, but to Yarrick, it was home. Ambassador Lyra stepped into the hangar, her silver robes shimmering under the dim light. Her sharp, angular features were set in a look of disdain as she surveyed the ship. "This," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism, "is the great human warship that's supposed to save us all?" Yarrick grinned, his deep-set eyes twinkling with mischief. "Looks can be deceiving, Ambassador. The Starforge has more firepower than you'd think." Lyra raised an eyebrow, her long, silvery hair swaying as she shook her head. "The Syndicate's fleet will be here in less than 3 cycles. We need a real ship, not some ancient relic." Yarrick approached the control panel, his boots crunching on the dusty floor. "You know, there's an old saying on Earth, never judge a book by its cover. And never trust a human's cryptic expressions," Lyra muttered under her breath. But she followed him nonetheless, her curiosity piqued despite her reservations. The hangar doors groaned open, revealing the cavernous interior. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting an eerie glow on the Starforge. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight. The ship was massive, its hull covered in layers of rust and carbon scoring. The once proud emblem of the Terran fleet was barely visible beneath the grime. "This is a joke, right?" Lyra asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Please tell me this is some bizarre human attempt at humor." Yarrick strode toward the ship, his boots leaving clear prints in the dust. "This ship, Ambassador, is exactly what we need. The Starforge isn't just any vessel. She's a legend." "She's scrap metal," Lyra countered, her diplomatic restraint crumbling. "We're supposed to outrun the most advanced fleet in the galaxy in this relic?" Yarrick reached the ship's access ramp and turned to face her, his green eyes sparkling with mischief. "Want to see something cool?" Before she could protest, he disappeared into the ship. Moments later, lights began flickering along the hull, and a deep thrumming filled the hangar. The sound built gradually, like a sleeping giant slowly awakening. "Oh no," Lyra whispered, backing away. "No, no, no." The thrumming became a growl, then a roar. The entire hangar began to vibrate as the Starforge's ancient engines came to life. The sound was deafening, a primal scream of power that sent Lyra staggering backward, her hands clasped over her ears. Yarrick emerged from the ship, walking down the ramp with the casual confidence of someone who'd just proven their point. The engines continued their earth-shaking symphony behind him. "Still think she's just scrap metal?" he shouted over the noise. Lyra slowly lowered her hands, her expression a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. It actually works." "Works?" Yarrick laughed. "Ambassador, this is just her idol. Wait until you see what she can really do." The engines powered down to a low purr, and Lyra found herself drawn closer to the ship, studying it with new eyes. "I may have been hasty in my judgment," she admitted. "The Starforge isn't pretty," Yarrick said, running a hand along the scarred hull. "But she's got heart. And sometimes, Ambassador, that's all you need." As they boarded the ship, Lyra couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this rusty relic and its enigmatic captain were exactly what the galaxy needed. Part 2, The Hidden Power. The interior of the Starforge was a stark contrast to its weathered exterior. As Yarrick led Lyra through the ship's corridors, she couldn't help but notice the intricate modifications that had been made. The walls were lined with advanced control panels, their surfaces gleaming with a mix of human and alien technology. The air hummed with energy, a subtle vibration that spoke of the ship's latent power. These modifications, Lyra said, running her slender fingers along a panel of glowing controls, they're not standard Terran fleet issue. Yarrick smiled, his green eyes reflecting the soft light of the console. Good eye. The Starforge was my father's ship before she was mine. He spent decades upgrading her, incorporating technology from a dozen different species. Lyra's bright eyes widened with recognition. Your father. Wait, Yarrick as in Captain Elias Yarrick? The hero of the Zephyr Wars? The same, Yarrick confirmed, his voice carrying a mix of pride and something deeper. He commanded the Starforge during the border conflicts. This old girl helped save 3 systems from the Crixian invasion. Lyra's diplomatic mask slipped, revealing genuine amazement. I studied those battles in the Academy. The Zephyr run through the Astral Nebula, was this ship part of that? Among other things, Yarrick replied, leading her toward a sealed door at the end of the corridor. The door hissed open, revealing an engineering bay that made Lyra gasp. Instead of the expected ancient machinery, the chamber housed a sophisticated array of technology that seemed to defy the ship's weathered exterior. At the center of the room was a massive core, pulsating with a soft, blue light. Is that a quantum flux core? Lyra stepped closer, her silver robes rustling against the metal floor. Those are practically mythical. How did your father? He won it in a card game, Yarrick chuckled, moving to stand beside her. The previous owner was a Zorlakian merchant who'd never played poker before. Their proximity sent an unexpected shiver through Lyra's body. The human's natural warmth radiated through his jacket, and she found herself increasingly aware of his presence. Your species continues to surprise me, she admitted, turning to face him. Just when I think I understand humans, you reveal another layer. Jarek's grin widened. We're good at that. It's part of our charm. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Lyra felt her pulse quicken, an unfamiliar but not unwelcome sensation. So, she said, breaking the moment before it became too intense, tell me about these other modifications. If we're going to outrun the Syndicate, I need to know exactly what this ship can do. For the next few hours, they moved through the ship's systems methodically. Yarrick explained each upgrade, each battle-tested improvement, while Lyra absorbed the information with growing appreciation. The Starforge wasn't just a warship, she was a testament to human ingenuity and determination. As they worked, their conversations drifted between technical discussions and personal revelations. Lyra found herself sharing stories of her own rise through the diplomatic ranks, while Yarrick spoke of growing up on various starships, learning the art of war and survival from his legendary father. The thing about humans, Yarrick explained as they reached the bridge, is that we're never satisfied with good enough. We're always pushing boundaries, always asking what if, even when it seems impossible. Even then? Lyra asked, settling into the co-pilot's chair. The seat adjusted automatically to her form, another subtle upgrade she hadn't expected. Especially then, Yarrick replied, removing his jacket to reveal a well-muscled frame beneath. The action caught Lyra off guard, and she found herself studying the way his simple black shirt hugged his body. Impossible just means we haven't figured it out yet, he added, his voice dropping to a low rumble. The bridge's ambient lighting shifted to evening mode, creating an intimate atmosphere that made Lyra increasingly aware of their solitude. The professional distance she usually maintained felt like it was evaporating with each passing moment. Your confidence is intriguing, she admitted, her voice softer than intended. Most species I've encountered approach problems with careful calculation. Humans seem to tackle them head-on, with an almost reckless enthusiasm. Yarrick leaned against the navigation console, his presence commanding yet relaxed. Life's too short for hesitation, Ambassador. When you see something worth pursuing, you should go for it. The double meaning in his words wasn't lost on her. Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. Is that another human philosophy? She asked, her heart racing beneath her diplomatic exterior. "More of a personal one," Yarok replied, his voice husky. "Care to test its validity?" The tension between them had built to an almost tangible level. Lyra found herself rising from her chair, drawn to him by a force as powerful as any gravitational field. "Perhaps," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "Some hands-on research would be beneficial, for diplomatic purposes, of course." Jarek's smile turned predatory. "Of course. We wouldn't want to neglect our diplomatic duties." Their lips were inches apart when the ship's proximity alarms blared, shattering the moment. A massive vessel had just dropped out of hyperspace nearby, a Syndicate warship, its weapons already charging. Lyra stepped back, her diplomatic training kicking in. "We need to move. Now." Yarok nodded, his expression hardening as he returned to the pilot's seat. "Hold on tight, Ambassador. This is going to get interesting." As the Starforge's engines roared to life, Lyra couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. The ship, the mission, the man beside her, it was all more than she had bargained for. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. The Syndicate warship loomed on the view screen, its sleek, menacing form a stark contrast to the Starforge's rugged appearance. But as Jarek's hands flew across the controls, Lyra realized that this ship, and its captain, were far more than they seemed. "Ready to see what she can really do?" Yarok asked, his eyes gleaming with determination. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. "Show me." With a roar of its engines, the Starforge surged forward, diving straight into the heart of the storm. Part 3, The Syndicate Threat. The Syndicate warship loomed on the view screen, its sleek, angular design a stark contrast to the Starforge's rugged, battle-worn appearance. Its weapons glowed ominously as they powered up, casting an eerie red light across the bridge. Lyra gripped the edges of her seat, her heart pounding as Jarek's hands danced across the controls with practiced ease. "They're locking onto us," Lyra said, her voice tight with tension. "We need to move. Now." Jarek's grin didn't waver. "Hold on tight, Ambassador. This is where the fun begins." With a roar of its engines, the Starforge surged forward, diving straight toward the Syndicate warship. The maneuver was so audacious that even Lyra, with her years of diplomatic training, couldn't suppress a gasp. "Are you insane?" she shouted, her eyes wide as the warship filled the view screen. "We're flying right into their firing range." "Exactly," Yarok replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. "They won't expect it." The Syndicate warship fired, its energy weapons lancing through space. But Yarok was already executing a series of rapid maneuvers, twisting and turning the Starforge with impossible precision. The energy beams missed by mere meters, their heat washing over the ship's shields. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she watched Yarok work. His hands moved with a fluid grace, his eyes locked on the view screen as he guided the ship through the deadly dance. For a moment, she forgot about the danger, mesmerized by the sheer skill on display. "You've done this before," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yarok chuckled. "A few times. Syndicate ships are fast, but they're predictable. They rely too much on their tech and not enough on their instincts." As if to prove his point, he executed a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding another volley of energy fire. The Syndicate warship loomed closer, its massive hull filling the view screen. "What's the plan?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We hit them where it hurts," Yarok replied, his tone grim. "Their engines. Without them, they're dead in the water." He brought up a tactical display, highlighting the warship's weak points. Lyra studied the diagram, her sharp mind quickly grasping the strategy. "Their shield matrix is strongest at the front," she observed. "But if we come in from below, we might be able to bypass it." Yarok nodded, impressed. "You've got a good eye, Ambassador. Let's give it a shot." With a series of rapid commands, he guided the Starforge into a steep dive, slipping beneath the Syndicate warship's massive hull. The maneuver was risky, but Jarek's confidence was unwavering. "Hold on," he warned as the ship's engines roared to life. The Starforge shot forward, its weapons locking onto the warship's engines. Yarok fired, a barrage of plasma bolts streaking through the void. The first volley struck the warship's shields, but the second found its mark, slamming into the engines with devastating force. The Syndicate warship shuddered, its engine sputtering as they struggled to maintain power. Yarok didn't give them a chance to recover. With another burst of speed, he brought the Starforge around for a second pass, firing another volley of plasma bolts. This time, the warship's engines exploded in a brilliant flash of light, their power core rupturing under the onslaught. The Syndicate ship listed to one side, its systems failing as it drifted helplessly through space. Lyra let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "We did it." Yarok leaned back in his seat, a satisfied smile on his face. "Told you she had more firepower than she looked." But their victory was short-lived. The ship's sensors pinged, alerting them to another threat. Lyra's eyes widened as she read the display. "More Syndicate ships," she said, her voice tight. "A lot more." Jarek's smile faded as he studied the tactical display. A fleet of Syndicate warships was closing in, their weapons already charging. "We can't take them all on," Lyra said, her mind racing. "We need to get out of here." Yarok nodded, his hands already moving across the controls. "Hold on. This is going to be rough." With a roar of its engines, the Starforge shot forward, diving into the heart of the Syndicate fleet. The ships opened fire, their energy weapons lighting up the void as they tried to bring the human vessel down. Yarok guided the ship through the deadly gauntlet, his movements precise and calculated. But even his skill couldn't avoid all the fire. The ship shuddered as a blast struck its shields, the impact sending sparks flying across the bridge. "Shields at 60%, Lyra reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to buy some time," Yarok said, his eyes locked on the view screen. "Any ideas?" Lyra's mind raced as she studied the tactical display. "There's a nearby asteroid field. If we can lose them in there, we might be able to make a break for it." Yarok grinned. "I like the way you think." With a series of rapid commands, he guided the Starforge toward the asteroid field, the Syndicate fleet hot on their tail. The asteroids loomed ahead, their massive forms tumbling through space in a deadly dance. "This is going to be close," Yarok warned as he guided the ship into the field. The asteroids rushed past, their jagged surfaces looming dangerously close. Jarek's hands moved with lightning speed, guiding the ship through the narrow gaps with impossible precision. The Syndicate ships followed, but their larger size made the maneuver far more difficult. One by one, the Syndicate ships were forced to pull back, their commanders unwilling to risk the deadly field. But one ship remained, its pilot determined to bring the Starforge down. "We've got one on our tail," Lyra reported, her eyes locked on the sensor display. Jarek's grin returned. "Let's give them something to remember." With a sharp twist of the controls, he guided the Starforge into a tight spiral, weaving through the asteroids with breathtaking skill. The Syndicate ship followed, its pilot struggling to keep up. As they emerged from the asteroid field, Yarok executed a sharp turn, bringing the Starforge around to face the pursuing ship. Before the Syndicate pilot could react, Yarok fired, a single plasma bolt streaking through the void. The bolt struck the Syndicate ship's bridge, its impact sending the vessel spinning out of control. Yarok didn't wait to see the result. With a roar of its engines, the Starforge shot forward, leaving the Syndicate fleet far behind. Lyra let out a long breath, her heart still racing from the adrenaline. "That was impressive." Yarok leaned back in his seat, a satisfied smile on his face. Just another day in the life of a starship captain. But as the adrenaline faded, Lyra's mind turned to the larger threat. The Syndicate fleet was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until the Starforge was destroyed. "We need a plan," she said, her voice serious. "We can't keep running forever." Yarrick nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed. But first, we need to regroup. There's a safe haven not far from here. We'll head there and figure out our next move." As the Starforge sped through the void, Lyra couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Despite the odds, they had survived. And with Yarrick at the helm, she knew they had a fighting chance. Part 4, The Alliance. The safe haven Yarrick had mentioned turned out to be a hidden outpost nestled in the shadow of a dying star. Its location was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few who had earned the trust of its enigmatic caretaker, a grizzled veteran named Commander Terran. As the Starforge docked in the outpost's hangar, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The place was a far cry from the polished halls of the Galactic Council. Rusted metal walls lined the corridors, and the air was thick with the scent of oil and machinery. Yet, there was a strange comfort in its rugged simplicity. Commander Terran greeted them at the docking bay, her sharp eyes scanning them with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. She was a tall, imposing figure, her silver hair cropped short and her face lined with the scars of countless battles. "Yarrick," she said, her voice gravelly but warm. "It's been a while." "Too long," Yarrick replied, clasping her forearm in a firm grip. "Terran, this is Ambassador Lyra." "Lyra, Commander Terran." Lyra inclined her head, her diplomatic training kicking in. "Commander. Thank you for your hospitality." Terran's gaze lingered on Lyra for a moment before she nodded. "Any friend of Jarrek's is welcome here. Come, let's get you settled." As they followed Terran through the outpost, Lyra couldn't help but notice the strange mix of technology and makeshift repairs. The place was a testament to resilience, a haven for those who lived on the fringes of the galaxy. "This outpost," Lyra said, her curiosity piqued, "how did it come to be?" Terran chuckled, a sound like grinding gears. "Let's just say it was built by those who've seen too much of the galaxy's darker side. It's a place for people who don't fit in anywhere else." Yarrick grinned. "And for those who need a place to disappear." Terran led them to a small, dimly lit room filled with maps and holographic displays. "Now," she said, crossing her arms, "what brings you here? And don't tell me it's just a social call." Jarrek's expression turned serious. "We're being hunted by the Syndicate. They've got a fleet on our tail, and we need a plan." Terran's eyes narrowed. "The Syndicate, huh? They've been getting bolder lately. What's their interest in you?" Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "They're after the Starforge. Its technology is unique. If they get their hands on it, it could tip the balance of power in the galaxy." Terran studied her for a moment before nodding. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place. But you're not going to like what I'm about to suggest." Yarrick raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Terran leaned over the table, her finger tracing a path on the holographic map. "There's a faction that's been causing the Syndicate a lot of trouble lately. They call themselves the KRYLL. They're a tough bunch, but they've got the firepower and the numbers to take on the Syndicate." Lyra's eyes widened. "The KRYLL? They're mercenaries, pirates. They're not exactly known for their loyalty." "True," Terran admitted. "But they've got a common enemy, and that makes them potential allies. If you can convince them to join forces, you might just stand a chance." Yarrick exchanged a glance with Lyra. "It's risky, but it might be our only option." Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "If we can secure their help, we could turn the tide against the Syndicate. But how do we convince them?" Terran grinned. "That's where I come in. I've got a contact in the KRYLL. He owes me a favor. I'll set up a meeting, but the rest is up to you. The meeting with the KRYLL took place in a seedy bar on the edge of Syndicate territory. The place was a far cry from the polished halls of the Galactic Council, its dim lighting and smoky air a stark contrast to the sterile environments Lyra was used to. As they entered, Jarek's hand rested on the hilt of his blaster, his eyes scanning the room for potential threats. Lyra, meanwhile, maintained her composure, her diplomatic training masking the unease she felt. Their contact, a KRYLL named Varek, was waiting for them in a shadowy corner. He was a tall, imposing figure, his scaled skin glinting in the dim light. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied them as they approached. "Terran sent you," he said, his voice a low growl. "What do you want?" Yarek stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "We need your help. The Syndicate is after us, and we're looking for allies." Varek's lips curled into a sneer. "And why should we care about your problems?" Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Because the Syndicate is a threat to all of us. If they get their hands on the Starforge, they'll be unstoppable. But if we work together, we can stop them." Varek leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "And what's in it for us?" Yarek exchanged a glance with Lyra before answering. "We've got intel on Syndicate operations. Their supply routes, their weak points. Help us, and we'll share it with you." Varek's expression shifted, a glint of interest in his eyes. "You've got my attention. But if this is some kind of trick—" "It's not," Lyra interrupted, her voice firm. "We're offering you a chance to strike a blow against the Syndicate. The question is, are you willing to take it?" For a long moment, Varek said nothing, his gaze flickering between them. Then, with a slow nod, he extended his hand. "You've got a deal," he said. "But if you double-cross us, you'll regret it." Yarek clasped his hand, a grim smile on his face. "Wouldn't dream of it." As they left the bar, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. They had secured an alliance, but the real challenge lay ahead. The Syndicate was still out there, and they wouldn't stop until the Starforge was destroyed. "Do you think we can trust them?" Lyra asked as they made their way back to the ship. Yarek shrugged. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford right now. But they've got the firepower we need, and that's what matters." Lyra nodded, her mind already racing with plans and strategies. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. With Yarek at her side and the KRYLL as allies, they might just have a chance to turn the tide against the Syndicate. But as they boarded the Starforge and prepared for the battles to come, one thing was clear: the fight was far from over.